Your life will be full of trials and tribulations. You will have to face the worst hardships humanity has to offer in today's world, or maybe even in the history of humanity. You will not experience the pleasures and joys of life like your friends and your family. You will be treated as an anti hero because of your beliefs, philosophies, and even your critical thinking skills. A prime representation of a tragic figure. You will face the truth of this particular world, unfair, for every turn and decision you make in your life. You are doomed to see the truth of illusions and reality. But at the same time, you can also be sitting in a yard, having a party day and night, and enjoy everything a human can enjoy on earth if you take a risk in life and maybe even become the next hand you take. Now, you must be thinking this is some sort of why your loneliness makes you smarter than the rest of the world video, or some sort of motivational video intro to make you pumped and hooked to become a man you are supposed to be after you swallowed the red pill. But nope, it's not. This prediction I just narrated, this revelation I just unveiled in front of you, the journey of this stoic anti-hero was and is a classification used by Vedic astrology based on your nakshatra, even before you were born. You must have heard or even read in your Jan Kundli or in your Vedic horoscope a category that goes by the name Gun or Ganas or Ganam. Today, In the Mind will be giving you the deepest dive anyone can take on this topic based on narratology, sociology, psychology, philosophy, and even mathematics. If you haven't seen my intro video yet, then let this be a formal introduction to make you comfortable with what you can expect from this channel. In this video, we will be talking about Gun or Ganas or the personality archetype system found in Vedic astrology and dissected using 22 subjects such as Jungian analysis, structural narratological perspective, narrative voice and focalization, temporal and developmental narratology, genre theory application, post-colonial and cultural narratology, psychoanalytical narrative approaches, cognitive narratology, feminist and gender narratology, digital and transmedia narratology, philosophy and ethical narratology, neural networks and algorithmic thinking, neurocomputation, neuroscience, neurotopology, neurolinguistics, Lacanian analysis, economical thinking, computational linguistics, game theory, anthropological perspective, and sociological framework. I know the list is pretty long, but I'll make sure it has all the entertainment you seek from your social media addiction. So, for the sake of your engagement and the ease I need to explain about this Vedic personality classification system, let's begin with the story. The story of Mayasura, the architect of Maya Sabha in Khandavprastha, or as we all know by the name,
Behold this
Indraprastha,
magnificent kingdom,
the same palace
testament
where
to
the
our enduring
Pandavas found
spirit
solace
and
from the
divine
wrath of
grace.
Kauravas, but in the end made them feel so embarrassed and insulted in a home tour, it ended up causing the famous war Mahabharata is known for, the Kurukshetra war. I'll explain everything in detail after the short movie presentation about the story of Khandavprastha. Towards the west of Yamuna River, near the area we now know by the name Karkoda, Haryana, inside a barren jungle found in northern India, then a small province under the Kuru dynasty called Khandav I, where a particular group of Asuras, Rakshasas, Daityas, Danavas, and half-serpent beings who went by the name Nagas. The rulers of this kingdom, Mayasura, son of Kashyapa and Danu, and Takshaka, the head of the Nagas, co-inhabited this one peacefully. It was a bustling village where many classes of beings coexisted together in harmony and tolerance. Yet this forest was not suitable for Manushas of that time, since it was protected by Lord Indra himself. The forest itself had a supernatural force bounded to all the elements of its environment. Since Asuras were neither Devas or Manushas, nor were the favored race as in based on how the population was segmented during those ancient mythological times.
No use.
Or neither were they considered as the divine species in front of gods and supreme deities. On a particular day, the god of fire, named Agni, decided to destroy the forest so he could satisfy his own hunger. Multiple attempts were made to burn down this one, but because of the protection or because of the curse given by Lord Indra himself, every attempt made by Agni was thwarted by rains and storms facilitated by Lord Indra's powers or words. Every time Lord Agni tried to burn this forest down, dark clouds used to hover up and the storms used to shower the heaviest of rainfall to foil his efforts. For the greed of his appetite, for the desires of a Deva to consume this land for his own pleasure, Agni turned into a Brahmana and decided to ask help from Lord Krishna himself. He convinced Krishna how this forest could be a sharp, as in a curse for Manushas and Devas in the future, and thus burning down of this entire forest was a necessity for their survival. Krishna decided to help this Brahmana and took Arjuna to incinerate this forest once and for all from the outside. Arjuna used his famous Gandhiva and Agneya Astra given by Lord Agni himself to burn this forest down. But Indra couldn't let him have this way without a fight. He used his famous weapon, the thunderbolt called Vajra, to stop Arjuna on his tracks and in turn injured him. But with the help of Lord Krishna and the blessing he received from Varaha, Arjuna used his Vayu Astra to aid Agni for his consumption of this forest. He defeated all Devas, Asuras and the inhabitants of this forest to clear the entire vegetation. All but 7 living creatures survived, and among them were a Naga called Ashwasena, 5 Sangrakas or celestial birds, and the famous Danav architect of Mayasabha, Mayasura, also known by the name Maya Danav. He may be one of the reasons why the most famous and scientifically backed text of Indian astrology and astronomy exists, called the Surya Siddhanta. Maybe one of the reasons why we must be talking about Gana or Ganas in this video. Then the rest is history, as we all have heard from this famous epic. The rest of the story even extends beyond the Kurukshetra war. But what we can understand from this snippet, this tiny chunk of a nugget told by this epic, are 3 main things. Good and evil coexist in every species who's trying to survive. Humans have never been quite efficient in classifying personalities. We all think we may be siding with the good without even realizing what is evil. To elaborate this story with structural narratological perspective using archetypal character analysis, all the characters in this story can be classified into 3 ganas based on Vedic astrology. Devagana functions as the hero archetype, characters with divine qualities, moral clarity, and idealistic motivations. In the story, Indra, who was protecting Khandavan for his own reasons, and also Agni, who wanted to burn down this forest for his appetite, are good traditional examples for this Gana. Even Arjuna and Krishna can be seen having traits of this Gana. And the second is Manushya Gana, representing the everyman archetype, balanced, relatable protagonist who embody human complexity. The Gana for whom Krishna decided to burn the forest down in order to establish Indraprastha, and also Arjuna, who aided Agni and defeated Indra. Agni and Indra can also be seen having traits of this Gana. The third is Rakshasa Gana, the Gana that serves as the shadow or the anti-hero archetype. Powerful, ambitious characters with darker impulses but not necessarily evil, such as Takshaka or Mayasura. The problem of this system comes down to this quintessential issue. Takshaka and Mayasura also have the traits of Devagana and Manushyagana if you saw them through the cultural perspectives of Khandaprastha forest. The story from their viewpoint is never discussed in this epic. I know it's a bit too vague, but first, did you notice a lot of fallacies and biases in this classification system? Yet, a kind of truth we can't ignore. Some of the fallacies and biases may be clear for you, such as confirmation bias, reification bias, cultural bias, post hoc reasoning, and golden ratio fallacy. We found these biases and fallacies in this Vedic classification system. Pat yourself in the back because you have what it takes to be a narratologist. Even if you didn't, you still have what it takes to be a narratologist or maybe a good storyteller, but probably among your friends in a bar or with your family around the dining table. I mean, I don't want to be judgmental in the age of AI, but storytelling is still an art or a skill. According to Prob's functional analysis, Devagana individuals often fulfill helper donor functions in narratives, providing guidance, wisdom, or moral support like a sage or a teacher. Krishna, Indra, and Agni have played these parts in this story. Manushagana characters typically serve as the primary protagonist undergoing transformation, and they can be seen as the chosen one or even side characters. Arjuna and Mayasura were the prime protagonists slash antagonists of this entire story. Rakshasagana figures function as antagonists, challengers, or catalysts to drive conflict and change, but doesn't necessarily have to be villains. They're more of an anti-hero, but yes, in the extremes we can see psychopaths coming from this category. Agni, Mayasura, and even Indra can be seen to have this gana. So what does this mean? How can one person have all the ganas in them? Isn't a gana fixed from the day before you were born? How can gods or supreme deities have Rakshasa Gana traits in them? Aren't these traits supposed to be assigned to the inhabitants of the Khandaprastha forest? Wasn't that the right place where all the Asuras, Daityas, and Danas were living? You see, the ratio of all the three Ganas can be found in our personalities in multiple variations. But some Gana will be high in some people and low in others, such as some friend whom we know as idealistic, helpful, and charitable could have more Devgana traits in him than Asuragana traits, whereas a relative whom we know as a catalyst for change or conflict among our family members could have more Asuragana traits than Deva or Manushyagana. Then again, if we are all humans, then we have definitely seen all kinds of laymen who are complex but quiet in nature. Or let's say, for example, aunties and uncles who are living a simple life but have the experience to be reliable. They have an inner life of their own, but they look like they're just passing us by in this journey. Ganas was an ancient Hindu way of classifying Freud's id, ego, and superego before Freud even discovered this theory. But the difference was Ganas was seen more of a permanent feature than a transient one. And then the theory clicks. We get a new frontier combining mythology and psychology where all the three Ganas are found in every human, yet we all have our favorites or are inclined to have certain traits of a Gana than others. To elaborate how I classify Ganas, we can use a narrative voice and focalization framework called the narrative reliability technique, which classifies Ganas again into three categories. At first, we will be looking at Devgana perspective, which tends to have more idealistic, morally certain narration, potentially for naive or overly optimistic viewpoints. For example, Lord Agni having the clear goals towards the consumption of Khanda 1 for saving humanity from the curse of his appetite, Lord Indra having the optimism for the sanctity of the forest, and Lord Krishna siding with Lord Agni to burn down the forest in order to establish Indraprastha. They were all doing what they believed to be good, yet they were all naive to not look at the situation from both the sides. They were the victims of their own idealism, yet they did everything they believed to be ethically and morally superior. Although Krishna is beyond any of these categories, since he's the abstraction of our universe itself, in the form of playful twists and turns, a sort of trickster archetype who sides in the greater good of humanity. Plot armor or not, he is one of the most fascinating characters in any mythology. Like, I don't know how to sum him up, but that's a topic for a later episode. In the second category or perspective, we have Manushya Gana perspective, who have more of a balanced and reliable narration that acknowledges multiple viewpoints and moral complexity. For example, you can see Lord Krishna as a Manushya, since he's an avatar of Lord Vishnu, and the complex calculations he make to come up with a decision, or we can see them in the moral dilemmas faced by Arjuna before he sets the forest on fire. We can see the same kind of moral dilemmas and questions before he went to the Kurukshetra war. I mean, Bhagavad Gita is all about those moral dilemmas and viewpoints. You can also see it in Lord Indra, who's trying to protect Daityas and Danavs, or what we all call as criminals based on our current legal theory we have in our society. Although crime back then used to be existing as anything or anyone below the Brahmin caste. But think it in this way: a kind of a protector who is going against his norms and dogmas and tries to protect the exact opposite race or species, or what Devas considered as enemies of their own clan in mythologies and traditions. Indra is the king of gods and other celestial beings, and he gave protection to certain clan of asuras and rakshasas. In other words, demons for the good behavior and penance. Now that is moral complexity. You can find them in Mayasura as well, since his forest was burned down, which is his home, and he helps
Behold
Krishna to
this magnificent
establish
kingdom,
Indraprastha
a
at the same
testament to our
very
enduring
place, in the
spirit
very
and
soil
divine
he used to
grace.
live. He helps the people who destroyed his home and killed his family. It could be due to certain ramifications he would have gone through if he didn't comply, but still a kind of contrarian viewpoint when it came to the acceptance of change. And the third perspective will be the Rakshasa perspective, which gives us a potential unreliable narration driven by self-interest, ambition, or unconventional moral frameworks. For example, Lord Agni can be seen having this
Everyone
gana
should know their
when he was
place in
feeding
our
his greed
society.
or convincing Krishna.
That is dharma.
Mayasura can also be seen having this gana since he created Mayasabha, that was a chief catalyst to cause the Kurukshetra war. You can see it in many stories involving Indra and Krishna as well, if we have to explore their entire character arcs across all Puranas and epics. Even Takshaka could also be seen having traits of this Gana, since his son later kills Arjuna's son as a revenge for burning his family and relatives down. But we'll get to those stories in later episodes. What I want you to understand are these perspectives of Gana and its attribution when it comes to the analysis of different personalities, and hope you're following through based on Maya Suzera's story. If you need some internal focalization to understand the story better, you can see Devgana characters have often transparent motivations and clear moral compass, either to get what they want or to protect what they believe to be good for humanity and the gods. Manushya characters exhibit complex internal conflicts and gradual character development. usually going through or facing character shifts between Deva and Rakshasa. And Rakshasagana characters may have hidden agendas, layered motivation, and morally ambitious goals. This is not limited to this story, but if we have to dig deeper into the character arcs across numerous Hindu mythological texts using narrative time and transformation, we find Devgana individuals may resist change, preferring stability and traditional values, whether the traditions or the ways they see to maintain or attain stability has any rationality or reason behind it. Indra and Agni both had these characteristics. Manushagana adapt fluidly to temporal changes and life transitions, whether those changes and transitions are for the good or bad. Arjuna was conflicted yet followed the path shown by Krishna. Mayasura decided to build Maya Sabha for the Pandavas. Rakshasagana figures often catalyze rapid dramatic changes in narrative timeline, whether it is for the greater good or evil. Agni, Krishna, and the Asuras can come under this category. If we take a closer look and compare them to the popular stories we hear and listen around us, we can see certain similarities with every character we love or hate in our favorite movies or series. According to genre theory in narratology, these mythological characters, such as Devagana, are natural protagonists in devotional literature, moral tales, and divine stories like Gadriel, Yoda, Dumbledore, Gojo, Saturo, or even Marvel superhero in Avengers. Manushagana are central characters in social realism, family sagas, and coming of age narratives like Harry Potter, Bella, Katniss Everdeen, Luke Skywalker, the Pevensies, and even Jesse Pinkman and Skylar White. Rakshasagana are perfect for dark fantasy, psychological thrillers, and complex moral dramas like Walter White, Frank Underwood, Don Draper, Dexter Morgan, Wolverine, or even Sherlock Holmes. A Shakespeare analysis to these mythologies can also reveal the tragic and comic arcs, like Devagana aligns with comic endings, or if we have to analyze based on classical sense, they are more about restoration of order and harmony, as we saw with Indra, Agni, and Krishna.
The nature of this
Manushagana suits both tragic and comic forms, flexible enough for various outcomes such as Maya Sura and Arjuna. Rakshasagana naturally fits tragic forms but can also provide comic relief through excess and exaggeration such as Agni, Maya Sura, or Takshaka. But how does this system differ from the Western canon? What separates Ganas from Freudian, Lacanian, or even Campbellian archetypal journeys? You see, in order to understand that, we need to see it through a post-colonial and narratological lens and define how the Gana system reflects indigenous Indian narrative tradition that predate Western character typologies, and how each Gana carries specific cultural associations. Yet it is not so different from the US or even the Indian two semi-three party system of conservatives, centrists, and liberals. If we have to explore the power dynamics between the three Ganas, Devgana represents traditional authority and spiritual power. Manushagana embodies democratic, egalitarian values and human agency, and Rakshasagana challenges established power structures and conventional morality. Just to reflect the Ganas in the faces of my life, I see Devgana as a phase I went through when I used to be young, Rakshasagana as a phase I went through when I was a teenager, and Manushagana as I grew older and wiser. You can comment about your phases of your life based on these three Ganas in the comment section, or even if you believe such a concept to be true or not. But by now, you must have understood how Deva represents superego, Manusha represents ego, and Rakshasa represents id inside a human, not gods and demons. But we need to have a Jungian analysis to understand the complexities of this Gana. Since Ganas are not limited to simple three-level Freudian hierarchies. In order to get a better perspective, we need a Jungian narrative analysis to get more resolution of what Ganas represent to humanity. Like Devagana connects to the sage and innocent archetype, wise but maybe too pure for their own good, even for others. Manushyagana represents or embodies the explorer or the lover or the caregiver archetype. They are constantly discovering who they are and trying to be as good as possible for whatever they believe good means. And Rakshasagana aligns with the rebel archetype or the magician archetype or even the ruler archetype, who are challenging norms, creating disruptions, or in the extreme ends, based on what we have heard or seen in Hindu mythology, becoming dictators or strict rulers in their kingdoms. I am looking at you, Shengis. Or in other words, Devagana represents the divine qualities a human possess. This aligns with what Jung might call the self archetype or the transcendent function. It represents the higher spiritual aspects of personality, individuals orienting towards meaning, service, and transcendence. Jung would see this as expressing the human drive towards the individuation and connection to the numinous. Manushyagana represents the human side of our personality. This corresponds to the balanced, ego-conscious personality that Jung considered healthy psychological functioning. These individuals operate primarily in the realm of ordinary consciousness, balancing practical concerns with emotional and social needs. This represents the integrated personality navigating between two opposing forces. Rakshasagana represents the demonic nature of humans. Rather than representing as negative, Jung would interpret this as representing the shadow archetype and primal energies. This isn't about evil, but about raw, instinctual forces that are essential in a psychological wholeness. Jung believed integrating shadow aspects was crucial for individuation. But other than these vague psychological evaluation, is there any cognitive foundations to the Gana system? Can we find any solid frameworks based on which we can ascertain these distinctions other than the big five personality traits? Well, that's where I'm going to stop, and we'll be continuing a journey to the bottom of our 22 levels in the next episode. In the next episode, we will be discussing more complex topics based on mental models and reader comprehension and much more. So, what did we learn from today's video? We learned about an ancient personality archetypal system called the Gana system that we find in Vedic astrology and Hindu mythological texts. We understood how the traditional views of Gana might not be the accurate representation how these Ganas are operating in our consciousness. Through the story of Mayasura and Khandaprastha, we also saw how all these three Ganas might be distributed in varying proportions in all three Ganas, or how all the three Ganas are represented in Hindu mythology. Through real life world examples and the examples from our famous or popular culture, we also understood how we can find these Ganas in everyone or every character we have seen through our series, movies, or in our daily life. So far, we have reached 7 levels of depth among the 22 levels we will be discussing in order to understand Gana system. Right now, we just going through literature as well as social sciences, but we will be getting into the hard science of this Gana system and maybe even delve with mathematics. So that's it for today's video, and I hope you liked the video, and if you did like the video, please like and subscribe. It will help the channel a lot. As you can see, it's a very nascent channel who's trying to grow, and let's keep exploring what's in the mind.